Okay, everybody a bunch here. Mr. President?
How are you, sir? Good. Good morning. Wonderful. Great to meet you. Welcome. Hey, friend, how are you?
We inbound the ball.
Well, I think we're going to get going because we have a very special guest joining us in just a little while, and we need to make sure that folks are where they need to be, make sure everybody is safe and secure. So good morning and welcome to the U.S. Conference of Mayors Winter Meeting. Before we get started, as we did this morning, I want to express our heartfelt sympathies for the people of Southern California. Devastation that we've seen in Los Angeles and around Los Angeles is almost beyond comprehension. Los Angeles has a long road ahead, and I think we can say the face of this great American city has been forever changed. But we can also be sure that it will return stronger. We thank the firefighters, emergency personnel, and volunteers who have been fighting these blazes. We mourn the victims and those in need. And though she cannot join us this week, we stand with Mayor Karen Bass and other California mayors who are fighting for their city and their region. We will use the full force of this organization to support federal disaster relief, as we have done for other natural disasters, to ensure these communities receive the resources they need to rebuild. This is a terrible chapter in Los Angeles' story, but it is not the last one. And we will do all that we can as the U.S. Conference of Mayors to support Mayor Bass, other mayors in the region, with their full recovery. What a week to be in our nation's capital, right? Presidential inauguration is Monday, just down Pennsylvania Avenue on the steps of the Capitol. It's a moment of storied tradition going back 236 years to President Washington's inaugural address in New York. It's a moment, regardless of our politics or our differences, to celebrate the continuation of this great American experiment. It's also the moment when the work of governing begins once again. Now, I know I speak for the great mayor standing with me today when I say America's mayors know a thing or two about governing. In a time of so much challenge, a time when so much continues to divide us, America's mayors, Republicans, Democrats, and independents are an example of what can be accomplished when we put solutions before partisanship. That's because mayors don't have time for partisanship or politics. The people we represent just expect us to get things done, to solve problems, to put them first. And this organization has shown time and time again what is possible when we share our shared voice to drive progress. And that's exactly what we're doing here this week at the U.S. Conference of Mayors Winter Meeting. Today, America's cities are thriving. Our economies are strong. Crime has dropped dramatically. And we're eager to keep building on the progress that we've made. But here's the thing, for all of our success, there remain challenges facing this country, facing America's cities that will require a strong partnership between local and federal officials. And one of our biggest challenges, I would say the biggest challenge, is getting a handle on the housing crisis that's straining millions of American families, often forcing them to choose between paying the rent or buying groceries for their kids. A housing crisis that continues to impede our economy and exacerbate income inequality. It's a top priority of this conference, as illustrated by the results of a new survey of our mayors that I'm pleased to share with you today. It's a survey that underscores just how critical that strong local federal partnership will be to getting our arms around this crisis, a crisis impacting every city across our nation, regardless of region or size or economic footprint. Here are the top lines. 89% of mayors said that flexible and direct funding for cities to stimulate housing supply, preservation, and access is extremely or very important. 87% of mayors said that it is extremely or very important that the federal government reform and streamline existing federal housing programs. So not necessarily more money, but making some of these federal programs more flexible so that local leaders can put together resources to get more housing units built. And more than 4 in 5 mayors indicated that Congress's failure to pass a significant housing bill will worsen housing affordability, housing access, economic opportunity, and homelessness. That's why we're calling on the new administration and Congress to support and quickly pass the largest and most comprehensive investment legislation in housing in our country's history. It must incentivize production, help families buy their first home, and ensure that our first responders, teachers, and frontline healthcare workers can live where they work, in the communities of America where they serve. When campaigning and elections conclude, the people we represent expect us to rise above any differences and come together for the good of the country. There is a time when we must all identify opportunities to come together as a nation. As mayors, we stand ready to work with leaders from both parties to further strengthen our economies, keep cities safe, and ensure our cities and entire country thrive over the next 4 years and beyond. Before I ask Mayor David Holt to share some comments, I'd ask for each of the mayors that are up here with us now to introduce themselves. Maybe, Mayor, start with my Buckeye friend, Mayor Tito Brown of Youngstown.
Tito Brown, Youngstown, Ohio. Marcus Muhammad, City of Benton Harbor, Michigan.
Ethan Baker, Troy, Michigan.
Don Hardy Kingston, North Carolina.
Tom Broderick, Anderson, Indiana.
Christina Mern, Findlay, Ohio.
Daniel Rickerman, Columbia, South Carolina.
Brian Barnett, Rochester Hills, Michigan.
Sean Patterson Howard, Mount Vernon, New York.
Elizabeth Couts, Burnsville, Minnesota.
Jim Ross, Arlington, Texas.
David Holt, Oklahoma City.
Todd Gloria, San Diego, California.
Brian Waller, Piscataway, New Jersey.
Malik Evans, Rochester, New York.
Lyrian Gaylor Baird, Lincoln, Nebraska. Paige Cognetti, Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Wade Capsicavage, Toledo, Ohio.
Jane Castor, Tampa, Florida.
Mike Duggan, Detroit, Michigan.
Jonathan Bush, Metuchen, New Jersey.
Mayor Joy Cooper from the city of Hallandale Beach, Florida.
And I think I'm last, Joe Gammon, Bridgeport.
Michelle Davis Younger, City of Manassas
Aquanetta
and
Warren,
Virginia.
Fontana, California.
Sorry.
Carrie Gordon, City of Balch Springs, Texas.
Kim Thomas, Richmond Heights, Ohio.
Again, Michelle Davis Younger, City of Manassas and Virginia.
Any other mayors that I missed? All right. Please welcome our great Vice President, the Mayor of Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, David Holt.
Well, thank you, President Ginther of Columbus, for your leadership. You are a steady hand, and we're very grateful for your bipartisan approach and the way that you have led this organization over the last 6 months, and we look forward to the next 6 months. And I also thank Second Vice President Gloria of San Diego, who you'll hear from in just a moment. And to all our mayors here this morning, and to our hundreds of mayors assembled here this weekend, it is an honor to serve with you. And that's not just a platitude. I want to spend my 3 minutes here sharing with our friends in the Washington media why this group of leaders are so unique and so vital to our nation right now. I came to Washington, D.C. 28 years ago as a college student at George Washington University. I came here because I was a serious person coming to a serious place to do serious things. The decisions that were made in this city saved the Union 160 years ago. They saved the world 80 years ago. And they established this nation as the economic, cultural, and military power of the planet. Serious people did serious things in this city. And inaugurations were moments in time when we rallied around serious aspirations. A nation that wants to be great has to have serious leadership. These mayors gathered here this weekend represent the cohort of American political leaders who still reliably answer that call. These mayors are serious people, and therefore we're here in Washington to talk about the real issues that face our constituents. Issues like housing and infrastructure, public safety, and the economy. We're here to model to Washington what effective leadership produces. My city just set a record for longest streak below 4% unemployment, 40 straight months. Metro cities as a whole produced 76% of the nation's employment growth and 93% of the nation's GDP growth last year. And we collectively represent 90% of the nation's total GDP. We are killing it. And because what ultimately matters are the results, we'll work with anyone. The people up here are Republicans, Democrats, and independents. As President Ginther said, we don't care about party. Above all, mayors are pragmatists because we care only about the results. We stand in front of this Washington media once a year, and I hope that when we stand in front of you, you are always reminded that when you want to get something done, when you want serious leadership, when you want people who got into this to serve others above self, America's mayors are still those people. We come here to Washington not just to advocate for the outcomes important to our residents, but to model the kind of leadership and public service that drew me to this town 28 years ago. These mayors are getting things done, and that's why it is an honor to serve with each of them. And I commend our colleagues in the media today for joining us because you've wisely chosen to be with the greatest class of political leadership this country currently has. Thank you. And it's my honor to bring to the podium, please welcome, fellow mayors, please welcome Mayor Gloria of San Diego.
Mayor Holt is always a hard act to follow, but thank you, Mayor Holt and Mayor Ginther, both for your comments and for your leadership of our incredible conference. It is great to be here with my fellow mayors for this very important meeting in our nation's capital. I want to just take a moment to express our conference's appreciation to Mayor Bowser for hosting us in her great city. She is unimaginably busy right now, but we appreciate her strong leadership and her participation within this conference. We certainly enjoy her membership here. Mayors are here today because regardless of where we're from or who we voted for, we all face similar opportunities and similar challenges. The good news is that America's cities are on the rise, as you just heard from Mayor Holt. They are thriving after years of progress and investment. But of course, there continues to be challenges facing our cities in every part of our nation. Things like growing our economies, building upon our progress with infrastructure, ensuring that our cities are safe for our residents and the families that call them home. And as Mayor Ginther said earlier, making sure that every American has a safe and affordable place to call home. Our president has unveiled the top lines of our new survey on housing, particularly as they relate to the importance to strong local federal partnerships in order to make improvements in this very important issue. I want to spend just my time to spend a bit more, share a little more insight to complete the picture of that survey, the context that further underscores why coordinated action will be absolutely crucial to our success in tackling this national housing crisis. Now, observe that we rightly spend a lot of time talking about our national budget deficit. We talk a lot about our trade deficits. We don't talk nearly enough about our housing deficit. It is enormous. It impacts every American, often extremely acutely. And that's what our survey shows. Today in America, we are experiencing a shortfall, a deficit of 7 million homes. 7 million homes. And this is more than just about the bricks and mortar that go into those homes. For America's families, this is deeply personal. It's about the stress of watching that paycheck that you work so hard to earn disappear with ever-rising rents. It's about the anxiety and the despair that comes with the constant fear of homelessness. But for the grace of God, go I, right? Rental costs in this country are up by 18% over the last 3 years. And the cost to buy a home, up 21% over the same time period. And we can only, at this point, predict that it'll continue to get worse, with that deficit increasing by about 2 million more units over the next 5 years if something is not done. When considering this conversation, you're hearing this from the mayor of San Diego, coastal city in California. You're like, of course you're dealing with high housing costs. I remember my dear friend, a great member of this conference, former Huntington, West Virginia Mayor Steve Williams, who once told me, cities big and small, urban and rural, are all being faced with this issue. The only difference is magnitude and geography. As mayors, we are taking advantage of every tool that we have at the local level to increase housing supply and to decrease prices. but we need help from our federal partners to do even more. Land use and zoning reform can help, and many of our cities are actively doing that. Our president is doing that in his city. I'm doing it in San Diego, and that is certainly making it easier to build more housing. But we need federal funds to make sure that much of that housing is not only affordable, but stays affordable for 55 years or more. And both Mayors Ginther and Holt so eloquently noted that we have seen what bipartisan action can do to do things like renew our nation's infrastructure through the bipartisan infrastructure law. We've also seen what it can do to revive our economies through important pieces of legislation like the American Rescue Plan. Now what is needed is bipartisan action to restock America's housing supply in order to make it more affordable for everyday working and middle-class Americans. And we're here to be clear, we're here to make it clear that when cities succeed, America succeeds, and that's why we are here this week in our nation's capital. I appreciate the chance to share those comments, and I'll turn it back to our great president, Mayor Ginther.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you, sir.
I think a couple other mayors have joined us after we did our roll call. Any mayors that haven't introduced themselves, please do.
I'm Paul Young, Mayor of the City of Memphis. Quentin Lucas, Kansas City, Missouri.
Latoya Cantrell, New Orleans,
Tim Keller, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And Kathy Sheehan from Albany, New York. Get up here, Kathy. Get up here. And I do want to acknowledge some of our past presidents, the great former mayor of Louisville. Did I say that right? Louisville? Greg Fisher, and Doug Palmer, and Brian Barnett, and Elizabeth Couts. Thank you all. Be happy. And our most immediate past president, Hillary Sheevy from Reno, Nevada. Great to see you. Welcome. Questions from the press, we'd be happy to take them. Holt gets all the tough ones.
We do.
Boy, must have fed and watered you boys good. Yes?
On housing, the federal government hasn't really been in the housing business for quite a while, so what, isn't it up to the local level? And what are you expecting from the federal government?
Well, I think part of the reason we find ourselves in the supply crisis we find ourselves in is because the federal government hasn't been involved. We believe as a conference that housing is infrastructure. And if we're going to invest in bipartisan ways and historic and transformational ways and other forms of infrastructure, we ought to do that for housing as well. I think most of the federal officials I've talked to, as Todd mentioned, have stressed to me that we need zoning code reform, we need land use changes that need to be driven by the local level. But there is an openness to supporting making more flexible existing federal programs, because that's part of it, making it easier for local governments to access federal funding, but it's also about more investments coming directly to cities and more flexible dollars so that we can enter. We're setting up in our community a regional housing coalition, which will be a public-private partnership to get more units at every price point, market rate, affordable, workforce, and otherwise. We need more units. And so we need more units at every price point to deal with the supply crisis. We're about 200,000 short in Central Ohio, and as Mayor Gloria said, several million short nationally. And the way we do that is by both increasing, making sure the money comes directly to cities to get things done, and making existing federal programs more flexible and practical. What other questions? Yes?
Hey, this is Kristen with Politico. For those of you who oversee sanctuary cities or have been involved in sheltering migrants, what would it mean for your cities if Trump does follow through on this threat to revoke federal funding? And how are you bracing for policies like deportations over the next few weeks and months?
Well, I'll ask, Second Vice President Gloria to speak to this. He's the former, most recent chair of our Immigration Committee for the task force, and obviously San Diego, California, and his leadership has particular perspective on this. I think what's important to remember is all we've heard about thus far is mass deportation. There are no details, there are no plans, there's no legislation, there's nothing specific for us to respond to. Many of our cities have been actively working on making our community safer. We're going to continue to do that. It's a little premature for us to respond to a bumper sticker or a talking point. Obviously, we will speak loudly and clearly when some of those details are spelled out in the ways that they'll impact cities. But Todd, you want to speak to any more?
Sure, I can try. I think our president handled that extremely well. I would just say, much like what he said, there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty about what is meant by that statement. And that makes all of our jobs extremely difficult, not just on this hot button topic, but really anything, including housing. You'd ask a home builder, what's the thing they like the least? It's uncertainty of policies, of financing, et cetera. We find ourselves in a similar position. What is meant by that, and how is it exactly going to be accomplished? I would say that in my city, it would be extremely challenging. Immigrants make up a very large part of our community, an important part of our community. Some are documented, some are undocumented. Many of them lived in mixed status families, and that creates tremendous uncertainty for them as well. We obviously will be monitoring this extremely closely and engaging as is appropriate. Obviously, all of us want our communities to be safe, but we recognize a lot of that safety is provided by our immigrants who help to provide security work at businesses, who help staff schools and hospitals, who are critical components of caregiving in our communities. If that's what is meant by that bumper sticker line, that would be extremely chaotic. It would be bad for communities, and we would have to respond. But to be continued. If I may go back to the previous comment, though, I want to just try. I would agree that there's been a lack of federal leadership on housing for some time, but I want to draw attention to the fact that in recent history, the federal government stood up a new housing program that many of us take advantage of, VASH vouchers for homeless veterans. That is only a few years old. It's not like Section 8 vouchers have been around for decades, much shorter period of time, but it is a federal initiative that is relatively new that has dramatically reduced the amount of homeless veterans in this nation. And I believe I speak for every mayor at this podium that we do not believe anyone who has served our nation in uniform should ever live on our city streets. And because of federal investment through the VASH voucher program, we have been able to do tremendous positive good of getting veterans off of our streets and into housing. I would wonder what we could do with additional federal investment for other key vulnerable communities. And I point that out just to back up what our president said a moment ago. Federal action in this space could be transformative in an extremely positive way, and that's why we're going to push for additional federal work when it comes to housing.
Yeah, until past President Whaley and Mayor Holt got involved, we'd been talking about Infrastructure Week for decades, and because of their leadership, we got a bipartisan infrastructure law which is transforming cities. If we can do it for roads and bridges and transit, we can do it for housing as well. Two other mayors have joined us that I want to shout out. The great mayor of Charlotte, Vi Lyles, is here, and it's great to see you. And Shamus Malik, the great mayor of Akron, Ohio, has joined us as well. Any other questions from the press this morning? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I might actually ask Vice President Holt, because he's got a longstanding personal and professional relationship with the HUD nominee. And I think Mayor Hudspeth and Mayor Watson know him as well from their service in Texas. I thought his comments yesterday that Tom shared with the conference earlier this morning were very, very promising. We think there's great opportunity. This conference, I used to chair the Metro Economies Council, and that group did some incredible work with, Senator Booker from New Jersey and Senator Scott, who will be joining us as well this weekend on opportunity zones during the last Trump administration. So I think there's great opportunities for us to work together. And we think housing, based on what we've heard out of the HUD Secretary designee during his confirmation is very promising. But Vice President Holt, you want to speak to it?
Sure, I'll add to that. Thank you. Yeah, I've known Scott Turner for 2 decades, so I know his passion and that his heart's in the right place. And he even he played for the Chargers. He lived in San Diego, obviously served in the State House in Texas. So I'm pretty excited. And he actually came and met with us in Rochester Hills at our leadership meeting there back during that first Trump administration. So he knows our organization. Obviously he can't do it all alone. He's going to need a White House and a Congress that wants to prioritize these issues as well. But I would also add that in his previous service, he was the White House's liaison on opportunity zones, an initiative from the first Trump administration that we were very supportive of, and would love to see if there are ways to revisit that concept to make it even more useful. But I think Scott Turner is a solid nominee and somebody we can work with in a role that has traditionally worked very closely with the Conference of Mayors. So, yeah, we're excited about him, I think. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you so much. Welcome to DC Mayors. At the draft agenda, I saw the LA mayor about some speech, but she's not coming, right? I would like to confirm.
Mayor Bass will not be here. But we stand with her and continue to lift her up and support her. And we look forward to going at the appropriate time to show our support and solidarity with her and bringing the full force of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and all of our partners to support the recovery and rebuilding of Los Angeles. Yes, sir.
David Smith of The Guardian. So you mentioned the bipartisan infrastructure law earlier. Just interested in many of you already feeling the tangible benefits of that, and how confident are you those will remain locked in the coming years and decades, even though there's a different administration?
Well, I know Columbus and Central Ohio has benefited a great deal. I don't know if Mayor Puraval is here, but there's a small little bridge connecting Ohio and Kentucky that I think 6 presidents have talked about that's actually happening. So I know there may be lots of mayors share stories. We've had major investments in transit. One of our neighborhoods that we're really lifting up, one that's not seen the investment and focus on the northeast side of Columbus, just received another huge award from the DOT. So I think there are probably lots of stories here about the infrastructure bill, and allow folks, if anybody wants to speak to that. Anybody? What's going on in their cities? All right.
Well, maybe one thought I have is, I think I know the answer to this question. I think it's going to look good. I would suggest we all raise our hand if we have received something that we can attribute to the bipartisan infrastructure law.
So you got lots of examples. But we can't go all day because we have a very special guest coming. Probably one more question, Sarah? Yes, ma'am.
You guys have talked about getting federal funding by Grace Ferguson with the event for light. You've talked about getting federal funding for building housing, but in the meantime, while that housing is being built, what federal assistance do you need for homelessness?
Yeah, a huge issue, obviously, with the emergency rental assistance going away, some of the other challenges, especially for higher growth cities. This supply crisis is really forcing out a lot of folks. We're seeing an increase in evictions. So additional emergency rental assistance, other support for families on the margins would be really critical as we start to deal with this longer term housing supply crisis. I'm looking, Mayor Kapsakavich, who chairs our housing committee. Anything you'd like to add to that?
I would just say that they're linked. If we had more affordable housing, there would be, at least on the margins, fewer homeless. I don't think you can look at them separately at all.
Kind of a shorter term, near term, longer term, as you mentioned. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you all.
So Andy, we got a mayor over here out of New Jersey needs a special favor from you. He's got the signature of every president right there. And he has a little card. He just needs you